Respected woman, listen to me carefully, because there are some feelings you should never explain away. There are moments when your heart gets quiet, your spirit gets uncomfortable, and something inside you whispers, something is not right. And if you keep ignoring that feeling just because you love him, one day you may discover that the red flag you dismissed was actually the warning that was trying to save you. Sometimes the greatest mistake a woman makes is not loving the wrong man. It is recognizing the wrong behavior and convincing herself that love will eventually change it. You see, love has a way of making us negotiate with things we would never accept from anybody else. You start saying, maybe he had a bad day. Then, maybe he is stressed. Then, maybe he just needs time. Then, eventually you are sitting alone, crying, trying to understand why the man you gave your heart to keeps making you feel like you are the problem. And I want you to understand something today. A red flag is not always a dramatic betrayal. Sometimes the biggest red flag is how you feel when you are around him. If you constantly feel anxious, confused, afraid to speak, afraid to ask questions, afraid to express your needs, afraid that one wrong sentence will make him angry or disappear, you need to stop and pay attention. Because healthy love may challenge you, but it should not constantly make you afraid. There is a difference between a relationship that requires patience and a relationship that requires you to abandon yourself. And too many women confuse the two. They say, I just need to be more understanding. No. Sometimes you do not need to become more understanding. Sometimes you need to become more honest with yourself. Because if you have to keep explaining his disrespect in order to remain comfortable with your decision to stay, something is already wrong. Let me tell you something about people. People show you who they are through patterns. Anybody can apologize once. Anybody can say, I promise I will do better. Anybody can cry. Anybody can become romantic when they feel you slipping away. But watch what happens after the emotion disappears. That is where the truth lives. Watch how he behaves when he is angry. Watch how he speaks to you when nobody is watching. Watch how he reacts when you say no. Watch how he treats you when you disagree with him. Watch whether he respects your boundaries when they inconvenience him. Because a man's character is not revealed by how beautifully he treats you when everything is going his way. His character is revealed by what he does when he does not get what he wants. And that is one of the biggest red flags you should never ignore. If a man becomes cruel, threatening, insulting, controlling, or emotionally punishing whenever you disagree with him, do not call that passion. Call it what it is, a warning. A healthy man can be disappointed without trying to destroy your peace. A healthy man can hear no without turning you into an enemy. A healthy man can disagree without disrespecting you. And a healthy man does not need to make you smaller so he can feel bigger. You have to understand this because some women have been taught that being a good woman means tolerating everything. They were taught to be patient, to forgive, to understand, to stay, to pray. And prayer is powerful. But prayer does not mean you have to stand in the middle of a burning house and call the smoke a test of your faith. Sometimes the answer to your prayer is the strength to walk away. Sometimes God does not change the person. Sometimes he changes your courage. Sometimes the lesson is not, how can I make him love me better? Sometimes the lesson is, why am I accepting so little love when I know I deserve more? And I know that question hurts because when you have invested months or years into somebody, walking away feels like admitting that you made a mistake. But listen to me, leaving something that is hurting you is not failure. Staying somewhere that destroys your confidence just because you are afraid to start over is not loyalty. You cannot keep sacrificing your peace just to prove that your love was real. Your love can be real and still have an ending. Your heart can be sincere and still need a boundary. You can forgive somebody and still never give them access to you again. That is maturity. And there is another red flag I want you to pay close attention to. When a man constantly makes you question your own reality. You tell him something hurt you, and suddenly the conversation becomes about how you are too sensitive. You explain how his behavior affected you, and suddenly you are the problem. You remember something he said, and he tells you that you imagined it. You ask for clarity, and he makes you feel guilty for asking. Eventually, you stop trusting your own feelings. You start thinking, maybe I am overreacting. Maybe you are not. Maybe you have simply been trained to doubt yourself. Never allow somebody to make you feel crazy for noticing what is happening right in front of you. Your intuition is not always perfect, but neither is it something you should constantly silence. If something feels wrong, slow down. Do not immediately accuse. Do not immediately attack. But pay attention, observe, listen. Look at the pattern, because you do not need to prove that somebody is a terrible person before you decide they are not good for you. Read that again in your heart. You do not need courtroom evidence to leave a relationship that is destroying your peace. You are allowed to say, this does not feel healthy for me. You are allowed to say, I do not want this kind of relationship. You are allowed to walk away before the situation becomes worse. And sometimes the hardest part is that the man may not be completely bad. He may have good moments. He may make you laugh. He may hold you when you cry. He may tell you that you are beautiful. He may even genuinely love you in his own way. But love alone does not make a relationship healthy. A person can love you and still be incapable of loving you correctly. That is a painful truth. And you have to be mature enough to accept it. Because you are not looking for somebody who simply says they love you. You are looking for somebody whose behavior makes that love safe. Somebody whose presence gives you room to breathe. Somebody who can communicate without manipulation. Somebody who can disagree without disrespect. Somebody who can make mistakes and take responsibility. Somebody who does not punish you for having standards. And most importantly, somebody who does not make you lose yourself just to keep them. So if you are watching this right now, and there is a man in your life who constantly makes your stomach tighten, constantly leaves you confused, constantly makes you question your worth, I want you to stop chasing an explanation for a moment. Ask yourself a different question. How do I feel when I am around him? Not how you feel when he finally texts you. Not how you feel when he apologizes. Not how you feel during the good days. How do you feel most of the time? Because your answer may tell you more than his promises ever will. And if your answer is exhausted, anxious, insecure, afraid, confused, or constantly unworthy, then something needs to change. Maybe the relationship needs boundaries. Maybe it needs an honest conversation. And maybe, in some situations, it needs an ending. But whatever you do, do not ignore the warning signs simply because you are afraid of losing him. Because sometimes the person you are terrified of losing is the very person you need to lose in order to find yourself again. And that is where your real journey begins. Not when he changes, when you decide that you will no longer abandon yourself. Now let me take you a little deeper, because there is something many women discover too late. A man does not have to hit you to hurt you. Like, he does not have to cheat to betray you. He does not have to leave you for another woman to make you feel abandoned. Sometimes a person can be standing right beside you and still make you feel completely alone. And that kind of loneliness is dangerous because nobody sees it. You smile around your friends. You post pictures. You tell everybody, we are good. But when the door closes and the phone goes silent, you are left wondering why the man you love makes you feel like you are constantly fighting for a place in his heart. That is a red flag you should never ignore. When affection becomes something you have to earn, when attention becomes something you have to beg for, when basic respect becomes something you have to negotiate, you need to stop and ask yourself what kind of relationship you are actually building. Because love should not feel like an audition. You should not wake up every morning wondering whether today he will choose you. You should not have to perform perfectly just to keep somebody interested. And you definitely should not have to compete with another woman, his phone, his ego, his friends, or his desire for control. A man who truly values you does not make you constantly compete for his attention. Now understand this carefully. There is a difference between a man being busy and a man making you feel unimportant. There is a difference between needing personal space and deliberately withholding affection to control you. There is a difference between being emotionally reserved and using silence as punishment. You have to learn the difference, because sometimes women hear a man say, "I just need space," and they immediately panic. But space is not necessarily a red flag. A healthy man can say, "I need some time to think, but we will talk later." That is communication. The red flag is when he disappears specifically to make you suffer. He knows you are worried. He knows you are waiting. He knows you are hurt. And instead of communicating, he uses silence to make you chase him. Now, that is not emotional maturity. That is emotional manipulation. And if you keep rewarding that behavior with more calls, more messages, more apologies, and more effort, you are teaching him that he can withdraw and you will run after him. You have to stop teaching people that your boundaries are negotiable. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing, not because you are playing games, not because you want revenge, but because you have finally understood that you cannot communicate with somebody who is committed to misunderstanding you. And there's another red flag that deserves your attention. A man who refuses to take responsibility. Every argument is somebody else's fault. His ex was crazy. His boss was jealous. His family did not understand him. His friends betrayed him. His childhood ruined him. Everybody is responsible for his behavior except him. Now listen, people go through real pain. People have difficult childhoods. People carry wounds. People experience betrayal. And those things deserve compassion. But pain can explain behavior. It does not excuse destructive behavior forever. At some point, a grown man has to say, "This happened to me, but I am responsible for what I do with it." That sentence separates maturity from excuses. If he hurts you and then blames you for being hurt, pay attention. If he breaks a promise and somehow convinces you that you caused him to break it, pay attention. If he insults you and then says, "You made me angry," pay attention. Because responsibility is one of the strongest foundations of a healthy relationship. A man who can say, "I was wrong," is not weak. He is strong. A man who can apologize without adding, "But you made me do it," is growing. A man who can look at his own behavior honestly is somebody capable of building something meaningful. But if every conversation turns into an investigation of your mistakes, while his mistakes disappear from the conversation, you are not having a partnership. You are standing before a man who wants the benefits of accountability without carrying the responsibility. And you cannot build a peaceful future with somebody who refuses to look at himself. Now, let me tell you something else. Never ignore how a man treats people who cannot give him anything. Watch how he treats the waiter. Watch how he treats the cashier. Watch how he talks to strangers. Watch how he treats his mother. Watch how he treats his employees. If he has them, watch how he treats people when he does not need their approval. Because anybody can behave well around someone they are trying to impress. Character shows up when there is nothing to gain. If he is charming to you but cruel to everybody beneath him, do not be flattered. You are seeing a preview. And one day, if circumstances change, you may become the person he believes is beneath him. The woman who says, "He would never treat me like that," needs to understand that people do not always change personalities when relationships change. Sometimes they simply reveal another side. That is why observation matters. Do not just listen to what he says about himself. Watch what he consistently does. He may tell you, "I am a good man." Okay, let his behavior testify. He may tell you, "I respect women." Good. Watch how he speaks about the women he used to love. He may tell you, I am different now. Fine. Watch whether his actions over time support that statement, because anybody can make a promise. Consistency is what gives a promise credibility, and I want to talk about one of the most dangerous red flags of all: control disguised as love. He wants to know where you are every second. He wants access to your phone. He gets angry when you spend time with your friends. He questions what you wear. He decides who you can talk to. He tells you that certain people are bad for you. He makes you feel guilty for having a life outside the relationship. And then he says, I just love you so much. No. Love does not require ownership. Love does not mean surveillance. Love does not mean isolation. A healthy relationship gives you connection without taking away your identity. You should still have your friends, your dreams, your goals, your interests, your private thoughts, your personal growth. You should still recognize yourself when you look in the mirror. Because if being loved by someone requires becoming a smaller version of yourself, that is not the kind of love you should be fighting to keep. I have seen people stay in relationships because they are afraid of being alone. And I understand that fear. Nobody wants to come home to an empty room. Nobody wants to start over. Nobody wants to watch somebody they love move on. But listen to me. Being alone and being lonely are not the same thing. You can be alone and be at peace. You can be alone and be growing. You can be alone and discover who you really are. But you can also be surrounded by somebody every day and slowly lose your soul. So do not measure the success of your relationship by whether you are together. Measure it by who you are becoming while you are together. Are you becoming more confident, more peaceful, more honest, more secure, more yourself? Or are you becoming quieter, more anxious, more afraid, more insecure, more dependent on his approval? Because the right relationship should not require you to disappear. And sometimes the hardest realization is this: you may not miss him. You may miss who you were when you believed he was going to become the man you needed. You may be holding on to potential instead of reality. You are loving the future version of him while suffering because of the present version. And that is where many women lose years. They keep saying, he will change. But when, after another betrayal, after another disrespectful argument, after another broken promise, after another year, how long are you willing to wait for somebody to become the person their actions are telling you they are not ready to be? You cannot love potential into maturity. You cannot sacrifice enough to make somebody responsible. You cannot be patient enough to make somebody respect you. And you cannot give somebody more love than they are willing to give themselves in personal growth. That is not your job. Your job is to protect the life you have been given. Your job is to know your worth. Your job is to establish boundaries. Your job is to stop confusing suffering with loyalty. And if he chooses to grow, let him grow. If he chooses to change, let his actions prove it. But do not put your life on pause waiting for somebody else to become ready. Because while you are waiting for him to change, your life is changing too. Your confidence is changing. Your dreams are changing. Your time is passing. And one day you may wake up and realize that you spent years trying to convince somebody to value what you should have been protecting from the beginning, yourself. So before you ask, how do I make him treat me better? Ask, what am I teaching him to believe I will tolerate? Because people learn your boundaries by what you enforce. If disrespect has no consequence, it becomes normal. If manipulation always gets rewarded with your attention, it continues. If every apology automatically resets the relationship without changed behavior, the apology becomes a tool instead of a transformation. You do not need to become cold. You do not need to become bitter. You do not need to stop believing in love. You simply need to become wiser about who receives access to your heart. Because your heart is precious, and not everybody deserves the keys to it. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is step back and watch. Stop explaining. Stop chasing. Stop rescuing. Stop making excuses. Watch. Let time reveal what words are hiding, because eventually consistency tells the truth. And when you finally see that truth clearly, you will have a decision to make. Not a decision about whether he is good enough, a decision about whether the relationship is good enough for the woman you are becoming. There comes a moment in every woman's life when she has to stop asking, does he love me? And start asking a much more important question. Does this relationship respect me? Because love without respect will eventually become a prison. And I know that sounds strong, but sometimes strong words are necessary when somebody has spent too long making excuses for what is hurting them. You can love a man deeply and still recognize that he is not healthy for your life. You can remember the beautiful moments and still admit that the painful ones have become too many. You can appreciate everything he once did for you and still decide that what he is doing now is unacceptable. That does not make you ungrateful. It makes you honest. And honesty is where your healing begins. One of the biggest red flags you should never ignore is when you become afraid to be yourself around him. Think about that. You used to laugh freely. You used to speak your mind. You used to wear what made you feel beautiful. You used to have dreams. You used to make plans. You used to walk into a room with confidence. But somewhere along the way, you started checking his mood before you checked your own. You started asking yourself, would he be upset if I say this? You think I am being difficult? Will he leave if I disagree? Will he become cold if I tell him how I really feel? And slowly, without realizing it, you stop being yourself. You became a version of yourself designed to keep the peace. Listen to me. If keeping a man requires you to silence yourself, that peace is too expensive. You are not supposed to spend your entire relationship walking on eggshells. A healthy relationship should have difficult conversations. It should have disagreements. It should have moments when two people see things differently. But disagreement should not make you feel unsafe. A mature man can hear something he does not like. A mature man can be corrected. A mature man can sit with discomfort without trying to punish the person who created it. And that is why emotional maturity matters more than charm. Charm can get you into a relationship. Character is what keeps it healthy. A man can be handsome. He can be successful. He can have money. He can know exactly what to say. He can make you feel like the most beautiful woman on earth. But if he cannot control his anger, if he cannot respect your boundaries, if he cannot communicate, if he cannot take responsibility, then eventually all that charm will become irrelevant. Because when life gets hard, character takes over. And life will get hard. There will be bills. There will be stress. There will be disappointments. There will be family problems. There will be misunderstandings. There will be moments when both of you are tired. And you need to know who you are standing beside when life stops being romantic. That is why you should never choose a man only because of how he makes you feel during the good times. Choose carefully based on how he handles the bad ones. Because anybody can love you when everything is easy. The real question is, can he still respect you when he is frustrated? Can he communicate when he is angry? Can he apologize when he is wrong? Can he support you when you are struggling? Can he celebrate your success without feeling threatened? Can he allow you to grow without trying to control you? These things matter. And another red flag is when a man secretly competes with you. You get a promotion, and instead of celebrating you, he finds a way to minimize it. You accomplish something and he makes a joke about it. You become more confident and suddenly he becomes uncomfortable. You start taking care of yourself and he says you are changing. You begin setting boundaries and he tells you that you are becoming difficult. Now, be careful. Sometimes people do not dislike your success. They dislike what your success does to their control over you. A secure man does not need you to fail so he can feel successful. He does not need you to be insecure so he can feel powerful. He does not need you to depend on him for everything just to feel important. A healthy man wants to see you become everything you were created to become. He does not look at your light and try to dim it. He looks at your light and says, shine. That is the kind of relationship you should desire. Not perfection, partnership, not control, trust, not fear, peace. And let me tell you something else that many women need to hear. Stop measuring a man by his potential. Measure him by his patterns. Potential is what he could become. Patterns are what he repeatedly chooses to be. And you cannot build your future on somebody's possibilities. You build your future on reality. If he says he wants to change but continues doing the same thing, believe the pattern. If he says he wants commitment but repeatedly behaves like a single man, believe the pattern. If he says he respects you but continues crossing your boundaries, believe the pattern. If he says he loves you but repeatedly destroys your peace, believe the pattern. Words matter, but behavior tells the story. Words are trying to describe. And sometimes the truth hurts because you already know it. You just do not want to accept it. You are waiting for one more conversation, one more apology, one more promise, one more good weekend, one more romantic night, one more sign that maybe this can work. But what if the sign you are waiting for is not coming because you already received it? What if the red flag is not hidden anymore? What if you are simply afraid of what accepting the truth will require you to do? That is where courage comes in. Courage does not mean you are not afraid. Courage means you stop allowing fear to make your decisions. Maybe you are afraid of being alone. Maybe you are afraid that nobody else will love you. Maybe you are afraid you wasted your time. Maybe you are afraid he will find somebody else. Maybe you are afraid you will regret leaving. But let me ask you something. What if the bigger regret is staying too long? What if 5 years from now you look back and realize you knew 5 years earlier? You felt it, you saw it, you knew something was wrong, but you kept talking yourself out of the truth. Do not let fear steal years from you. You do not have to know exactly what tomorrow looks like before you decide that today is not acceptable. You just need enough courage to take the next right step. And sometimes that step is a conversation. Sometimes it is a boundary. Sometimes it is counseling. Sometimes it is distance. And sometimes it is walking away. But whatever step you take it from a place of self-respect rather than revenge. Do not leave just to make him chase you. Do not create distance just to make him jealous. Do not walk away hoping he will finally beg. Walk away if you need to walk away because your peace matters. That is the difference between manipulation and self-respect. You are not leaving to punish him. You are leaving to protect yourself. And if he changes because he finally realizes what he lost, that is his journey. You do not have to supervise it. You do not have to wait around to see if he becomes better. You have your own life to live. And sometimes the most powerful transformation happens when you stop asking somebody else to validate your worth. You begin validating yourself. You wake up and realize, I don't need to convince anybody that I deserve respect. I don't need to beg for consistency. I don't need to compete for love. I don't need to shrink myself to keep somebody comfortable. I don't need to accept disrespect because I am afraid of being alone. And when you reach that place, something changes inside you. You stop chasing. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop accepting crumbs and calling them a meal. You stop confusing chemistry with compatibility. You stop confusing attention with affection. You stop confusing apologies with change. And you become dangerous in the best possible way. Not dangerous because you want revenge. Dangerous because you finally know your value. A woman who knows her value does not need to announce it. Her decisions show it. She does not scream. She does not beg. She does not threaten. She simply watches behavior and responds accordingly. And when a man realizes that he cannot manipulate her with silence, he cannot control her with guilt, he cannot keep her with empty promises, and he cannot break her with disrespect,